had always loved Christmas. Since childhood, she was enchanted by the colourful lights, the aroma of freshly baked cookies, and the atmosphere of hope that hovered in the air. Now, at 45, this magic remained alive in her heart, even though her adult life had not always been easy. Anne was a dedicated and caring psychologist, with a cosy office in the city centre. Its soft walls and comfortable sofas provided a safe and welcoming environment for her patients to share their intimate stories. With a natural gift for listening and understanding, Anne conveyed security and empathy with her brown eyes and gentle voice, helping patients overcome traumas and difficulties. However, behind her professional and serene demeanour, Anne carried her own story of pain and loss. 20 years earlier, she had experienced a love as intense as it was brief, which left deep marks on her heart. Lucas, the man she believed to be her soulmate, had disappeared from her life abruptly and inexplicably, leaving her with a void that was never completely filled. Anne vividly remembered the day she met Lucas. It was a university gathering in 1990. She, a young psychology student, was leaning against a wall, timidly observing the groups forming around her. It was then that her eyes met Lucas's, a tall young man with a captivating smile who was studying engineering. The connection was instantaneous. Lucas crossed the room toward her, introduced himself, and within minutes, they were immersed in a deep conversation about their dreams and aspirations. Anne was enchanted by Lucas's passion when speaking about his life and everything he planned. He, in turn, was fascinated by Anne's sensitivity and her gentle way of speaking. That night marked the beginning of an intense and full of complicity relationship. Anne and Lucas became inseparable. They spent hours talking in cozy cafes, exchanging ideas and supporting each other in their academic challenges. On weekends, they explored the city's parks and museums, always hand in hand and with smiles on their faces. 2 years passed, and the love between them only grew. On a starry summer night, Lucas surprised Anne with a marriage proposal. He took her to the place of their first meeting, decorated with lights and flowers. Kneeling, Lucas looked into Anne's eyes and said, "Will you marry me? You are the woman of my life, and it's with you that I want to spend the rest of my days." With tears in her eyes and her heart overflowing with happiness, Anne answered a heartfelt, "Yes." The future looked bright and full of promises. Anne and Lucas made exciting plans for their life together, dreaming of a home filled with love and children's laughter. However, fate had other plans for the couple. A few months after the engagement, Lucas received a job offer for only 5 months in a country on another continent. It was a unique opportunity that could boost his career and help realize the dreams they shared. Although the idea of being apart was painful, they both agreed it would be best for their future. The farewell at the airport was a moment of intense emotions. Anne struggled against the tears as Lucas hugged her tightly, promising that they would be together again soon. "It's just for a while, my love," he whispered in her ear. "I will work hard, and before you know it, we will be building our life together." The first months of separation were difficult, but bearable. They exchanged letters filled with love and longing, and made expensive and brief phone calls whenever possible. Anne counted the days until Lucas's return, imagining the moment when they could finally start their married life. However, everything changed abruptly. Lucas's letters stopped arriving, and he no longer answered the calls. Desperate, Anne contacted his parents, but they seemed as confused as she was. Anguish took over her heart, and she spent sleepless nights imagining 1,000 different scenarios, all terrible. Finally, after about 30 days of agonizing silence, Lucas called. The conversation was brief and devastating. With a cold and distant voice, he said he was no longer ready for marriage and that he would stay far away indefinitely. Before Anne could process what she was hearing or ask questions, he hung up, leaving her in a state of shock and disbelief. The months that followed were the darkest of Anne's life. She plunged into a deep depression, questioning everything she believed about love and about herself. Her studies, once her passion, became a heavy burden. Friends and family tried to console her, but nothing seemed to fill the void left by Lucas. It was during this difficult period that Anne leaned heavily on her family. They became a source of relief for her, amidst the chaos she felt internally. Gradually, Anne found the strength to rise again. She channeled her pain into determination, focusing on her studies and her training as a psychologist. Her own suffering made her more empathetic and understanding of others' pain, qualities that transformed her into an exceptional professional. The years passed, and Anne built a solid and respected career. Her practice became known as a place of healing and transformation. Alongside her clinical practice, she wrote 2 novels inspired by her story of love and loss. The books touched the hearts of thousands of readers who identified with the emotional journey described in the pages. Despite her professional success, Anne never managed to replicate the connection she had with Lucas in her subsequent relationships. There were romances, some even promising, but something was always missing. A part of her still waited for answers, for closure that never came. And so 20 years passed. Anne learned to live with her memories and to appreciate the life she built for herself. She found joy in her work, in her friendships, and in small everyday pleasures. Christmas in particular remained her favorite time of the year, a moment of renewal and hope. It was at one of these Christmas parties, organized by a group of friends, that fate decided to intervene once more in Anne's life. She was helping decorate the Christmas tree, laughing at a colleague's jokes, when her gaze wandered across the room and settled on a familiar face on the other side. Time seemed to stop. A few meters away stood Lucas. 20 years had passed, but Anne would recognize him anywhere. Her heart raced and her legs threatened to give way. Lucas saw her too. His expression was a whirlwind of emotions: surprise, fear, and something Anne couldn't decipher. For a moment, she thought about fleeing. The old pain of abandonment, buried under years of silence, throbbed menacingly, as if it had never left. But something held her to the ground. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the weight of destiny, finally placing before her the answers she had always sought in vain. Little did Anne know that, hours earlier, Lucas had already been watching her from a distance, hidden among the guests. His restless fingers tapped on the cane that supported him, while his hesitant eyes could not look away from her. He had rehearsed this moment so many times, but now, with her so close, every carefully planned word vanished like smoke. Lucas was not there by chance. He had known for months, through a mutual acquaintance, that Anne would be at that Christmas dinner. He also learned that she was still alone, just like him. This discovery consumed him. For weeks he debated with himself, gathering the courage to do what had tormented him for 2 decades. Confront her. Look into her eyes and say what he had been holding back for so long. He didn't want intermediaries, messages, or letters. He needed her presence to give meaning to what he planned to say. Time had not been kind to him. The marks of the past were reflected in his face, the curvature of his body, the cane he carried. Lucas knew that this might be his last chance to fix what had been broken. The 20 years that separated them or the changes in their lives didn't matter. He hadn't forgotten her. Never. And even though the idea of trying again seemed insane, it was the only thing that made sense. For Lucas, facing her that night was not just an act of courage. It was his only form of redemption. With cautious steps, Lucas approached, as if fearing both the encounter and the rejection. Anne felt a chill run down her spine upon realizing that his eyes, the same ones that once made her lose herself in overwhelming love, still carried that intense, unmistakable glow that seemed to transcend time. Before she could process the flood of emotions that overwhelmed her, his voice broke the silence. It was low, husky, but carried an unexpected firmness, as if each syllable were a thread stitching a broken past. Anne. The sound of her name on his lips brought a whirlwind of memories, each as vivid as it was painful. It was as if he uttered it not merely as a call, but as an invitation to untie the decades of knots they both carried in their hearts. She froze. The heart, which previously seemed so static, leapt painfully in her chest. She did not expect him to approach, let alone say her name as if it were a prayer. "Lucas," she replied, almost in a whisper, not sure whether she should flee or confront him. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice revealing a mix of urgency and vulnerability. Anne hesitated. Distrust grew in her chest, and for a moment she felt the weight of 20 years of silence pressing on her decision. "I don't know if I can talk about this now," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Lucas lowered his eyes, running his hand over the cane as if it gave him courage. "I understand that you don't want to, but I need this, Anne. I need you to listen to me. Just a minute. Please." The sincerity in his tone disarmed her, even against her will. She knew that part of her still wanted to retreat, to bury the past, but there was another part that silently clamoured for answers. "All right," she finally replied, trying to mask the vulnerability. "But not here." He nodded, pointing to the empty veranda at the back of the party. Anne followed in silence, the cold night air mingling with the tension that hung between them. When they arrived, Lucas broke the silence, as if time was no longer his ally. "Anne, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I need to explain. I need you to know why I left." She crossed her arms, trying to shield herself from the emotional onslaught and the biting wind. 20 years, Lucas," she replied, her voice trembling. "Do you think any explanation will change that?" He looked at her with the same intensity he had when he was younger, but now it carried something more, a deep regret. "I don't know if it will change, but you deserve to know the truth." And then, there on the porch of an unfamiliar house, under a starry winter sky, Lucas began to tell his story. A story of love, sacrifice, and a decision that changed the course of 2 lives forever. Lucas revealed that, during his stay in the distant country, he was involved in a serious car accident. The impact was so severe that he was in a coma for 2 days. Upon waking, he discovered that he had suffered serious injuries to his spine and legs. The doctors were unsure if he would walk normally again. Devastated by the news and fearing he would be a burden to Anne, Lucas made a decision that would haunt him for the next 20 years. He asked a friend to inform Anne that he needed some time alone to reflect. When he was able to communicate better, he made his parents promise not to tell Anne about his true condition. "I didn't want you to be tied to me out of pity or obligation," Lucas explained, tears running down his face. "You deserved a full life without having to care for someone who might never walk again. I thought I was freeing you, but in reality, I was condemning us to years of loneliness." Anne listened to everything in silence, tears also streaming down her face. She felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and surprisingly, relief. Finally, the mystery that had tormented her for so long was being unravelled. "Why didn't you let me choose?" Anne asked, her voice choked. "I would have stood by you, Lucas. I loved you more than anything." Lucas lowered his head, the shame evident on his face. "I know that now. I was a proud and frightened fool. I thought I was protecting you, but I only caused pain for both of us." Silence fell over them again, but this time it was different. It was a silence of understanding, of silent forgiveness, and of possibilities beginning to open. "And now?" Anne asked softly, looking into Lucas's eyes. "What happens now?" Lucas approached Anne, a gesture that brought back memories of a happy past. "Now, if you allow me, I would like to tell you everything. About my recovery, about how I never stopped thinking about you. And maybe we can see if there is still something between us." Anne felt her heart expand with an emotion she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. She squeezed Lucas's hand back and smiled through her tears. "I would really like that," she replied. Under the sparkling lights of the Christmas tree, Anne felt her heart beat as it hadn't for a long time. Lucas was by her side, but the decision hovering between them was too significant to be resolved with a simple glance. After so many years apart, so many winding paths and uncertainties, there was something undeniable that night. What they felt for each other was still real. "Do you still believe we have a chance?" he asked, his voice laden with hope, but also with apprehension. Anne hesitated. The memories of everything they had experienced, what they had lost, and the doubts they had carried their entire lives weighed heavily on her. But as she looked at Lucas, there was something stronger than reason. It was that fluttering in the stomach, the unsettling certainty that, despite everything, he was still the person she wanted to be with. "I don't know how it will be," she replied, her voice trembling but honest. "But I want to try." Lucas smiled, a shy smile, but one that brought genuine joy. There were no grand promises or certainties at that moment, but there was truth, and that was enough. The party continued around them, but for Anne and Lucas, time seemed to have stopped. They weren't ready to walk hand in hand or make grand declarations. They decided to take small steps, respecting the time and the scars each carried. Still, something was undeniable. They needed each other. In the days that followed, Anne decided to make room in her life for Lucas, and he did the same. It wasn't a perfect new beginning, but it was real. Gradually, the old fears gave way to trust, and the certainty that this love still had the power to transform. A few months later, the long-awaited wedding took place. In a field illuminated by the sunset, with garlands of flowers and laughter echoing, Anne walked down the aisle towards Lucas, who was waiting for her with teary eyes. Every step she took was like an affirmation. They had overcome time, circumstances, and their own fears. Friends and family surrounded them, witnessing not just a ceremony, but the rebirth of a love that refused to be extinguished. As the vows were exchanged, there were not enough words to describe the significance of that moment. Lucas looked at Anne and said, with a firm voice filled with emotion, "You were, are, and always will be my home." Anne, with tears in her eyes, responded, "And you, the reason I never stopped believing in love." The celebration that followed was a reflection of their journey, filled with joy, music, and the promise that this time the love they shared would face no more barriers. On that Christmas night that brought them together, it seemed that fate had given them a second chance, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. The future, which once seemed so uncertain, now shone with the light of renewed love, ready to face any adversity. And so Anne and Lucas began their new chapter together, proving that sometimes time does not destroy true love. It only strengthens it, making it even more beautiful. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.